Ashley, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Hi, Lupe. I'm so excited to be here.
I like to start every podcast interview by asking guests, as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I have a two-part answer. When I was really young, maybe elementary school, I really wanted to be a veterinarian. I loved animals. I would read all kinds of books about animals. We had a cat. I convinced my parents to let me get a rabbit one time. Like, my mom was totally against it, but I was persuasive with my dad. So I really wanted to be a veterinarian. And then I learned it's not just taking care of animals and making them better. Oftentimes have to deal with the end of life with animals
Mm,
too. And then I was like, no way, can't do
yeah.
that. So when I got older, probably high school, I really became in love with the idea of being a journalist. And I think it stemmed from the show Gilmore Girls. My mom and I loved that show, and the girl's name is Rory. And my mom used to always call me that I was her Rory
Oh.
because she was very studious and she cared a lot about her grades. She worked hard. She was going to go to Yale and she was going to be
Oh.
this journalist. And I really identified with her like
Mm.
character. I felt like that type A personality. So cared about their grades and things like that and being involved. So I really identified with her and I took a lot of language arts classes, a lot of writing work in high school. And ended up picking my college based on a school that had a really strong journalism program. And
Hmm.
that was
I didn't know
my,
that.
yeah, that was my degree that I entered college with. I only was in the school of journalism for my freshman year, and I was like, this isn't for me.
What was it about journalism that made it?
Well, I think it was a matter of circumstance. Had the circumstance been different, maybe I wouldn't have changed my major, but I really struggled with my advisor. I was really looking for guidance, and I just was not getting any.
Mm,
And so I was like, if I'm just going to be thrown to the wolves, maybe
mm.
this isn't for me. I started doing some work for the school's broadcast
Oh,
news.
okay. Okay. Yeah.
They had a news station and I started doing work. It was kind of isolating, honestly. They would just send you off on assignment all by yourself. I was a student. They would send me with the huge camera to go record and commentate and all this stuff. And I was just all by myself trying to figure it out. If this is what it's going to be like, I'm like, maybe it's not for me.
I've heard that from anchors that if you work for a small city, you do actually have to do all of it by yourself. I had a
Yeah.
news anchor on the podcast, Cleo, and she said, yeah, when she worked in a small city, she had to do the camera work and do this writing
Mhm.
and produce all of it basically.
Yeah, I really gave it a try, but I was like, man, I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm doing it all by myself. It was hard. And yeah, I did talk to one of the producers of the thing, and he was like, yeah, that's the gig. So I was like, I just don't think that's for me. I was undetermined for about a year
Ah,
or undeclared for
yeah.
my sophomore year. I think first semester, sophomore year. And then I fell into healthcare administration, and that is what I
Ah.
got my degree in.
So for the audience who doesn't know, could you share what you do today and that path from where you decided on healthcare administration
Mhm.
to your role today?
Sure. Well, today I'm a leadership and professional coach, which
Mhm.
is just kind of a way that I can summarize it. It's kind of hard to summarize sometimes, but I work with leaders, professionals, and teams just to improve the way that they are showing up in the workplace. I work with a lot of people who are in leadership roles, but some professionals too who are maybe a upper level individual contributor. And I love working with teams. I'm just so fascinated by the team dynamic and what we can accomplish when we work together. But prior to coaching, I started my career in healthcare administration and I worked in that field straight out of college. I got a job with an incredible organization that owe the leaders there so much gratitude for how I developed as a professional because I mean, as a 22-year-old, they threw so many opportunities my way to participate in things
Mm,
like strategic planning and annual reviews and
mm,
budgeting and board meetings. And I got to be a part of executive team meetings and things like
mm,
that. They just really invested in me and saw my potential of what I could be as a leader. From there, kind of moved pretty quickly up the ladder in the field. And I reached what I thought was my ultimate dream job at the age of 25, the job that
mm.
I thought I was going to have for maybe the rest of my career. I looked around and my peers were 40 plus. I didn't know anyone
Yeah.
who was my age in a role like that. And it was incredible. Again, so many learning
Mm,
opportunities, so much exposure to big decisions. And I was really lucky to get to build an executive team and hire people and build a culture of an organization. And that's where I started to develop my love for leadership development and for
mm.
coaching. I was working with a coach of my own and I was looking for something different. I was loving the leadership development piece, and coaching was just my natural leadership style, although I didn't know it at the time. I
Mm,
just was doing what came naturally to me. I was like, I wish I could be doing more of this work. I wish I could be
mm,
working with people one on one to help them with their skills. But working in healthcare, it's red tape, it's
mm.
policies and procedures, it's rules and regulation, all things that are so important, things I was trained to do and things I was good at, but it just was not where my passion was. I wanted to be investing in people more. So that's where I started exploring the idea of coaching with my coach. And he really encouraged me and supported me. And he said, you have the skills for it, you've got the heart for it, do it. And so I went back to school, and that's how we met, which I'm
Yes.
so lucky that we both were in that coaching program together. Yeah, honestly, I feel like it's been such a blessing. I love what I do now, and the individualization piece of it is,
Mm.
I think, for me, what makes it so great.
I didn't ask you when you first mentioned it, but what first attracted you to healthcare administration? What was it about healthcare administration that was like, this is it? It's not journalism,
Mhm,
it's this
mhm.
other thing.
Yeah, so a friend of mine really pointed me in that direction. And the funny thing is, I went to my university because of their journalism program, but then they actually happen to have the largest healthcare administration program in the country. And
Mm.
so when I switched, it was just to this incredible program. And I'm so lucky that I got to graduate from UW Eau Claire. I knew I was a very business minded person, very organized, very forward thinking, strategic. I took lots of extra courses in communications and things like that. But I wanted to do something where I knew I would be giving back, where I knew I would feel at the end of every day that the work I was doing was improving someone else's life. And so that's where the healthcare piece
Mm.
really fit into that,
Mhm.
because there are so many vulnerable people out there, people in difficult situations with their health, and that caregiver side of me, I got to use that side along with my business acumen. And that's why it felt like such a good fit. And I actually feel like that's probably why coaching feels so great to me, is because I really do care so much about my clients and just holding space for them and helping them to see who they truly are and develop and grow, and just getting to pour into them and help them pull things out of themselves that they maybe would not have on their own too.
That's beautiful. And I love that you pointed out that the caregiver piece also kind of shows up a little bit in your energy in coaching.
I would say that the number one thing when I meet with someone for the first time and I ask them, how did this first session feel for you? I always want to know. As a coach, I know how I felt on my end, but it's equally, maybe more important, how the client felt if we're determining chemistry and whatnot, if
Yeah.
it's going to be good to work together. And I am told time and time again that they were really nervous or had some anticipation, didn't know what to think. They might have been intimidated about the idea of coaching if they've never experienced it before, and just how comfortable and comforting it was to talk with me. And I think, I don't know, maybe that's my gift, is talking to complete strangers and making them feel totally comfortable to just share all their vulnerabilities and do the hard work that it takes to work through coaching and be on the receiving end of coaching. It's definitely hard work.
Yeah, and that's so important. It's such a big deal to have someone that in coaching as a coachee, I'm a coach, but as a coachee, it being the person getting the
Hmm.
coach and to feel safe and to be able
Yes.
to open up. And you do that so well. So I'd love to dive in a little bit into your leadership. So Ashley and I, we were in the coaching program together. I don't think Ashley remembers this, but our very first semester, we were grouped in the same, like we had little coaching groups that we would do some peer coaching. And while the professor supervised us and gave us comments. And I remember when you first started talking, I was just so impressed by your confidence and the way we didn't even see each other in video. This was all audio only because it was a
That's
virtual
right.
coaching program.
Yeah.
And just the way you carried yourself on that call, the tone, I just thought, oh, she's a confident leader. And then
Oh, thank you.
yeah. And then the way you just described, you said you reached this role, this position that you dreamed about when you first started thinking about healthcare administration at
Mhm.
25. I just think that's so impressive. As you think back to that time, what was it that allowed you to step into that? What was it about your personality, or how did you think about things to help you step into that? Because I can imagine that not every 25, you said every your peers are 40
Mhm.
or 40 and over. So I can imagine there must have been something there that separated you. What do you think, looking back on that, helped you get to that place?
Well, I grew up with such a great example. My dad,
Mm,
he was a military officer in the army.
mm,
And so he just had such a strong foundation as a leader. And
mm,
then he retired from the military and he moved into a corporate career. I mean, my whole life, I just looked up to him as a leader. He held
mm,
really high positions, and leadership was just something that I think was ingrained in me. It was
mm.
just the way I was raised, the way I knew how to be. I was
Yeah.
always that way from a young age. We watched home videos and my little birthday party and all my girlfriends running around were screaming and whatever. And I'm like, I'm the one who's like trying to regain control and telling everybody what to do. And of course, people think like, oh, she's just like a bossy little girl. But no, I
Leading.
hope if I have a daughter, I was leading the group, I was getting everybody together. So I think
Mm,
from that perspective, I was just raised with it. I had a sister who was 7 years younger than me, and my parents always said I was like her mini mommy. I just really cared so much about taking care of her and setting a really good example for her. That was extremely important to me. My dad gave me this mentality of leaders, anybody who is high up, they're just a person. They're
mm,
just like you. They're just like me. They've been through similar things that you've been through. They go home and they have a family. They watch
mm,
TV. They take out the trash. To look up to somebody in a leadership position and be intimidated by them is silly because
mm.
they're just like anybody else, which is easier said than done. But I really appreciate that he instilled that in me. Regardless of your title, I just want to see you for who you are as a person. And I think that's what helped me to never feel like I wasn't good enough or I wasn't old enough or I didn't have enough experience to be ready for a big job, a big title, because why not me? I mean, they wouldn't hire me if they didn't think I can do it. So let me throw my hat in the ring and prove that I can. And I'll make mistakes for sure, but the biggest thing is to learn from it. That's it.
I love that. Oh, I'm so motivated. So, as you think about that, you said you'll learn from it. You embrace this mentality of you're going to learn. It's this kind of
Mhm,
growth mindset that we hear about.
mhm,
Did you have doubts as you, let's say, when you were promoted when you were 25 into that role?
mhm.
Were there any doubts that surfaced for you? And there were, how did you handle them? How did you think about them?
Oh, I for sure had doubts. I mean, there's no way. Yeah, there were so many things I was experiencing it so fast that were brand new to me that I totally didn't know how to handle. I always tried to talk to people I trusted, to ask for advice. I like doing research. If I didn't understand something that was going on or I was going to have to make a decision on something, I tried to really lean in and understand it as much as I could in order to make the best decision possible. But I think for me, and maybe this is a little bit of a digression, always pushing to grow, I just always wanted to be better than I currently was.
Mm,
I was never a competitive person. And even my parents, I know, wanted me to do sports and wanted me to compete. And not that they ever pushed me to, but I think they could see that I had a high achievement mentality, but competition was something totally different to me. I
mm.
didn't view other people as my competition. Beating someone else was never motivating to me. I just wanted to improve myself. I was my own competition. If I was going to rise to that level, I was going to work really hard and master that and feel like I had achieved that. But then maybe when I started to get bored or stagnant, I was like, okay, it's time to challenge myself again. I was always ready to just push myself further. I do have a bit of a perfectionist mentality too. So when I say, like, oh, yeah, I made mistakes and I just learned from them, no, it was not that easy. There were tears, there was beating myself up, there was
Mm.
anxiety for sure. I mean, my poor husband, he's seen it all, but I think I just really tried to remind myself if I can get through this, what an experience it will have been, what a learning opportunity, and just imagine what will be the next thing that I can conquer if I can get through this right here.
Thinking about all the things I might have thought at that age, especially before coaching and all that, that I would have been like, oh my God, there's all these things I don't know how to do. And that would have been very intimidating for me at that point. So you looked at it as a challenge, a growth, and to step into that and know that you could be better and it would be prepare
Mhm.
you better for the future. What other lessons do you think you learned as you reflect back on that time? You stepping into a leadership role so young. So if you were talking to 25-year-old Ashley,
Yeah.
from your current self, what would you tell her? What would you tell the audience that's listening?
I think the number one thing would be don't take things personally. I don't think I'm the type of person who needs to be liked by everyone or I need everyone to be my friend.
Mm.
But when you're young, I think especially and you step into a leadership role, I had almost 200 people reporting to me, people I felt responsible to and responsible for, and not all of them liked me.
Mm.
And usually it was who didn't know me too well, but it was really difficult to intimately know 200 people, especially with multiple layers of management in between. But there were times when comments or looks or things like that, I would take that so personal and so harsh, and I would beat myself up over it. And just, I thought I was doing something wrong because someone else couldn't see me for who I really was.
Mm.
And if I could tell myself anything, I would just say, you're not for everybody. Not everyone is going
Mm.
to like you, and that's fine. I don't like everyone, but that doesn't mean that doesn't mean I hate them just because they're
Mm.
not maybe my favorite. And I think that's what I thought, is that if I felt that lacking of approval, it meant they thought I was terrible. At that point, it felt black and white to me. And I felt like maybe I had to prove myself to people. And I know so much more now that it's really, as a leader, you're not going to be liked by everyone. And it's not your job to be liked by everyone, but it is your job to be fair and to have integrity and lead with your values and the values of your organization as they're aligned with yours. And there's going to be some people who just don't see that, don't match with that, and that's okay.
Mm. I agree completely that taking the things personally can be something that can really keep us from reaching our goals or what people might
Mhm.
think about us. It can be something that really throws us off track.
I remember specifically at one point in that role, the vice president of human resources called me to share some feedback that was not that flattering. And I took it really hard.
Mm.
I took it extremely hard and I was speechless. I was crushed,
Mm.
honestly. And she was like, "You're not taking this very well." And I was like, "I don't know how I'm supposed to take. I'm not supposed to take it well. Am I supposed to be happy
Mm.
about it?" I think I wasn't used to that type of feedback.
Mm.
And maybe that was a piece of it. I was so high achieving and I
Mm.
was lucky to work for organizations that really invested in me and saw my potential. And so I was used to getting good feedback. And then I got into that role
Mm.
that was such a big leap for me, such a big challenge for me. And I was not perfect. I did not have it all figured out. I was stumbling through a lot of things and I probably had my own insecurities. And then other people were like, yeah, she's not doing so great in this area either.
Mm.
And that was hard. I think I've tried over the years to get better about accepting feedback and reasoning with myself in that all feedback is good, but you have to decide what to validate
Mm.
because feedback, when it's coming from one person, is just coming from their perspective, from the
Mm.
one piece of you that they're commenting on. It's typically not all encapsulating of who you are as a person or as a leader. And so if you receive a piece of feedback and you're a relatively self-aware person, which I feel like I am,
Mm.
and it just doesn't align, you can say, okay, I appreciate that and I'll take it into account. You don't have to think that you have to change who you are as a person because of one piece of feedback.
Mm. And so I guess what you're saying there is that feedback is good to
Mhm.
receive that feedback. It helps us grow. But then we can
Mhm.
also let our intuition listen to that feedback and decide whether that really lands. I know I've received feedback and it hurts in past
Mhm.
roles in corporate America. And I thought, ugh, that hurt. But I think there's some truth to it. And even though
Mhm.
it hurt, it was like, yeah, I could grow there.
Mhm. Yeah.
So what you're saying is that not all feedback is the same. So sometimes we take it with a grain of salt, I guess.
Yeah. Take it with a grain of salt for sure, but I guess I'm not saying to dismiss it, but you just have to decide what you want to sanction, what you want to decide is valuable. There's definitely times in your career where somebody is going to make an observation about you that is just not accurate. Maybe it was a 60-second interaction and they made a split judgment of you. And I think for leaders, especially, it gets hard because you have to have tough conversations. Sometimes you have to write people up and you have to follow a corrective action process. And when you're managing a large group of people, human beings are flawed. And so people are going to make mistakes. But as a leader, you can't let mistakes slide. I believe in giving grace and understanding, but I think that's where it was hard for me, is because I knew I was doing what was right in having some tough conversations with people and not allowing behavior that was not acceptable. But then it was thrown back in my face and that I was being a poor leader.
Mm.
And so in that instance, the feedback was coming from a source that was probably a bit biased, because
Yeah.
I had to have some difficult conversations with them and they didn't receive it well. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's a tough thing in leadership, especially. You have to have hard conversations at times, and it might come back to bite you. It might hurt relationships with people. It might cause some people not to like you very much. And that, you just kind of have to have thick skin a little bit, do what you have to do. I don't ever mean to be rude or disrespectful to anyone, but that's part of the whole bag when you're a leader.
Mm. And how do you think about handling hard conversations? What would you say to someone who's listening, who's thinking, I need to have a hard conversation, whether that's at
Mhm.
work or even in personal relationships? How do we go about thinking about that? Because it sounds like you had to do a lot of that as a leader.
Mhm. Yeah, I really never shied away from resolving conflict. I just felt
Mm.
like the longer you put it off, the worse it probably will get. And it also becomes more difficult, I think, to handle the correction of behavior if you let it go on, or it happened and then you try to correct it like 3 weeks later. It's not fresh in anyone's mind. So is it really going to be very easy to fix? So I always think timeliness is important. And I just always tried to handle it quickly, get the right people in the room. You know, if there was a conflict happening between two team members, say, and it got brought to my attention, these two people, they're having issues, it's affecting their peers, it's affecting our patients, this is what's going on. I was like, all right, let's go. Everybody get into a room together. We're all going to sit down and hash it out. And I just tried to give different sides opportunities to speak their piece. And I think it was like the mediator in me, probably the peacekeeper as a middle child, in that I just tried to help them see how they were more alike than different, and
Mm.
see how they had commonalities and how they could meet in the middle, see their varying perspectives. Like they say, there's three sides to the truth. There's his side and her side, and then there's the truth somewhere in the middle, because we all do view things based on our own perception. So just trying to let people speak their truth, their experience, hear someone else out, try to facilitate listening and understanding, and try to find some resolve, try to find the place in the middle. And for me, working in healthcare, it usually came down to, we're all here for one reason, and that's to take care of these patients. This behavior between A and B right
Mm.
now, it's not serving that purpose and that value.
Mm.
So how can we set this aside? How can we reach an understanding? How can we each agree that we're going to try a little bit harder so that we can get back to what's important here?
Mm. Well, I love that you shared that. What stood out to me is you said, I didn't shy away from hard conversations, and timeliness is so important. And one
That's
of the,
funny.
oh,
I'm
go ahead.
just realizing I'm that way with my husband too.
Oh, well, that's
I,
true. Like how we do one thing is how we do everything. So I love that you shared that, because I think if just thinking about coaching conversations with clients, I know one of the topics that can come up is wanting to avoid conversations and not have that uncomfortable conversation with a team member or someone, either a peer or someone who reports to them. I think that's very common
Mhm.
and something that a lot of people struggle with, both in work and personal. What would you say to someone who's struggling with that? As you shared these examples of mediating, it sounds so nice, but like, did you ever come across where you did that and they were like, nope, we still hate each other, or nope, this isn't going to work? I guess those are two parts. One, how do you think about it? And maybe some stories of encouragement when maybe it didn't work out so well.
Yeah. Okay. So the first question is, how do I think about it? Handling
Yeah,
conflict with
yeah,
clients,
yeah.
coaching clients.
Yeah, like if someone's listening and is a leader, or even
Yeah.
just in their personal life, individual contributor, but they're having to have a hard conversation.
Mhm.
Yeah, you seem to, instead of running away, you're running into the room.
Oh yeah,
And that's
I totally
different.
am.
And that's so different from a
I'm a
lot of
glutton for
people's.
punishment. I would say, if they're scared about the conflict, they're obviously where they are presently is not good. It's not where they want to be. There's an issue that needs to be resolved. And they have a few options. They can do nothing, and they're going to continue to experience more of the same.
Mm.
Nothing is going to change if you aren't going to do anything to change it. Or you can think about what could be the ultimate outcome if I do decide to take charge of this situation and have this conversation, and try to imagine really the best case scenario. If I could design this conversation to go exactly how I hope it would, what would I be
Mm,
wanting to get out of it? What would I want to make sure that I can communicate?
mm,
What would I like to learn?
mm.
What would I like to walk away with in understanding this other person's perspective? And what would I like our relationship to be like in the future? And so, kind of painting that picture of what you would like it to be different, then kind of motivates you to have that conversation to say, okay, I have an idea of how
Mm,
I'd like this to be better. And I
mm,
believe it can be better. So, okay, I feel better about having this conversation. I feel prepared. I know what I want to say. I know what I hope the resolution is that we're going to meet. I know what I would like to learn from this other person. So having an open mind and being willing to go into it, not necessarily thinking of it like it's a punishment or like it's a conflict, but it's the dialogue. Because I really don't believe people intentionally do things to hurt others. People don't want to be bad at their job. People
yeah.
typically have a reason behind why they're not performing well or communicating well. And so just going into that with an open mind and an open heart and trying to have a dialogue and understand better is usually what I feel like is the best mindset to go into that type of conversation with.
Mm. The word that's coming up for me is intentional. You were intentional about these conversations. You reflected on them. You thought about them. You didn't just call people up and let's see what happens. You thought about it as a leader. And I love that you said you envisioned what a positive outcome would be like
Mhm.
and that it's a dialogue. There's a perspective shift there. So, thinking about those situations that you had in the past, was there
Mhm.
ever a situation where, even though you did all the reflection, you went in with great intention, you envisioned what a good positive outcome might be, that it just didn't go well?
Well, first, I want to say that there were times when I did that work, and then even in a conversation with somebody with a very strong personality, somebody who I never thought we'd be able to make progress with, I've seen incredible things happen. I've seen
Mm,
incredible changes in attitude, changes in work, changes in the way
mm,
people communicate and show up. I've seen amazing things happen.
that's so good to
There's
hear.
yeah, but it doesn't always turn out great. Sometimes emotions are very high and
Mm.
people are not in a place to have a respectful conversation.
How do you handle
But
that after the fact? What does a
yeah,
leader do? Someone who went into a conversation and it just didn't go well. What would you
yeah.
say to someone listening?
I mean, trying to remain calm and remain neutral, I think is important. Not to be a robot or anything or show zero emotion, but
Yeah.
to try to have an appropriate level of emotion when it comes to whatever the topic at hand is. Sometimes you're not going to resolve everything in one conversation.
Mm,
And so, if it doesn't really get to the point that you were hoping, one option might be to say, okay, well, I think this is as much as we can really cover
mm,
today, but I think there's more for us to talk about. Can we meet again? Can
mm,
we continue this conversation in a couple of days? Oftentimes, a couple of days' time for both people to process can actually be really helpful. If the
mm,
first meeting was really heavy or really emotional, having some time
mm,
to process can make that second meeting go better. And maybe sometimes it's not just a one or two meeting thing. Maybe sometimes it's we need to maybe meet on a weekly basis for a period of time until we can see
mm,
growth and progress. It is up to the leader to really determine
mm,
what they think is possible. There are so many variations of how these types of conversations can go. I mean, I've gone into these conversations really willing and open to work with someone, and it's ended in a termination.
mm,
Because if the person is not willing to take ownership, not willing to commit to change, doesn't see the wrong in their behavior, sometimes as a leader, you have to make those tough decisions. It's tough. I
yeah.
hated those conversations.
Mm,
Hated it. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, "Oh, I'd really like to fire someone today." I
mm,
mean, no, it's terrible. Those conversations would keep me up at night. Yeah, that's again back to just some of the really tough things that you have to handle as a leader sometimes. And I think it always came back to just knowing your values, knowing your organization's culture, knowing what you wanted for your team and the people that you serve,
Mm.
And at the end of the day, if you could see the writing on the wall with that person, that they were not going to ever be able to reach alignment with what the expectation was, then you just kind of had to make that tough call sometimes.
Mm. And again, there's this pattern or this theme of you talking about facing it. You said maybe it's in a couple of days. I thought you were going to say in a couple of weeks. And so a couple of days, and then you said meet every week. And eventually, if it didn't work out, maybe it might lead to an even more difficult conversation termination. But then having that conversation, having to do the thing that is tough, but the right call, because I've heard that not making that decision, not terminating someone is more demotivating for the rest of the people on the team who are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So I think, again, this theme of as leaders, not avoiding working on these things. And I know part of the Dare to Lead training was that clear is kind. And
Mm,
so avoiding and not having those tough conversations is actually less kind because sometimes I think the mentality is, I don't want to be a bad person. I want to be mean. I don't want to like whatever it is. That actually clear is kind. That is the kind thing to do as a leader to
I
have these
agree.
conversations.
Yeah, I don't know where the saying is from. I didn't come up with it, but the phrase accountability is a gift.
Mm,
And I really believe that. And
mm,
accountability is something that a lot of managers and leaders struggle with. They can
mm,
set the expectation, but then when the expectation isn't met,
mm,
that's where they really struggle is, okay,
mm,
what do I do now? And I really do believe that clear is kind, accountability is a gift because people that we lead, they can't be successful if they don't know the definition of success. And
mm,
we can help to teach them what is expected. And I do believe in giving grace and giving chances and giving someone an opportunity to learn and grow in an area where maybe it is hard for them. Maybe organization is not their strong suit. And you
mm,
have to help them develop some systems and work on some ways so that things don't slip through the cracks. And
mm,
it does come down to that person's character, I think. Are they willing to
mm,
learn?
mm,
Are they willing to grow themselves and challenge themselves and say, yes, I will be willing to put in the work if you'll give me the chance. I know I messed up, but I want
mm.
to fix it. And that's where that clarity and the accountability and just helping people to live up to their fullest potential is such a gift a leader can give to their team.
Ashley, thank you so much. This conversation was so inspiring. I learned so much, and I know it's really going to resonate with people and be helpful. Thank you so much for being here today. How can people find you? How can people work with you?
Yes. Well, my company is called the Red Bud Collective. You can find me at the redbudcollective.com. That's my website with all my services and information. I'm on LinkedIn, Ashley Seeds, Seeds, and I have some fun on Instagram too at the Red Bud Collective.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lupe. It's so great talking with you. I know we are friends and we always have such great dialogue together, but your style and the way that you just listen and pick up on things is so fun. And this was so enjoyable. And yes, I was nervous, and you know that, but you made it so easy. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Ashley.